And we're live.
Awesome.
All right. So, Epicenter Bitcoin, episode 46 in 5, 4, 3. Hello, welcome to Epicenter Bitcoin, the show which talks about the technologies, projects, and startups driving decentralization and the global cryptocurrency revolution. My name is Sébastien Couture.
And I'm Brian Fabian Crane. Today we have with us Shawn Wilkinson. He's the founder and lead developer of Storj, so written Storj. We've talked about decentralized applications a bunch of times in the show. We've had Ethereum on twice, or just recently we had the Coinify with Tom Ding, where we talked about this. First time we're actually having someone in charge of a decentralized application on. And I'm super excited that we have the chance to kind of dive deep into an example of that, and hopefully we'll also get to understand a bit better actually the promise of decentralized applications in general. So hey Shawn, it's good meeting you.
Hello. So where do you want to get started first? Here to talk all about Storj, and where do you want to start?
So actually what we thought would be interesting would be to hear a bit about your background before we get kind of dive into Storj. So can you tell us, how did you get into Bitcoin, and how did that lead to ending up in Storj?
Sure. So I started with Bitcoin about 2012. I had a friend that was mining, so that's a cool thing. I'm not using my GPU for anything else, so I started mining as well. A nice little 6950. Then I said, that's making my room too hot, it's making all this noise, so I stopped mining. And then Bitcoin kind of gained a little traction. I came back and looked at it and said, this is actually a pretty interesting concept. So about 2013, I got involved in Bitcoin core development, started building up some of my own Bitcoin projects, doing a little bit of freelancing. And then I ended up working for BitShares about the end of 2013, beginning of 2014. And then I left from there and started working on Storj, so my own decentralized cloud storage platform that kind of incorporated all this Bitcoin stuff, all this blockchain technology into an existing ecosystem.
So you just got back
I have
from
a traditional background in CS, so I got my bachelor's in computer science from Morehouse College this year. So I kind of look at Bitcoin and the blockchain as simply tools that you can use for other platforms and other things, and that's where they kind of came together to build Storj.
And so you're based in Atlanta, right?
That is correct. We have BitPay down here, Bitcoin Magazine, Camp BX. So nice.
I understand you just got back from a little trip in Las Vegas where you were attending a couple of different conferences.
Indeed, I did a triple conference. I went first to the Coins in the Kingdom in Orlando, then I went to Coin Agenda. Well, I caught the edge of Inside Bitcoins, and then I went to Coin Agenda, then I went to Hashers United. So those were all in Vegas. So just got back today. Actually, I got back from the airport a few hours ago, and ready to get back to work.
Awesome.
All right, so where do you want to go next? I guess maybe a brief overview of Storj and what it does?
Yeah, tell us about Storj and perhaps about the company as well.
Sure. So Storj is a decentralized cloud storage platform. Basically what that means is we want to build a file storage network where you can store your files, your videos, your pictures, or whatnot on this network that doesn't have any central controls like a company like Dropbox or Google Drive. Because once you start getting into centralized companies that manage your data, you hope they would be a good steward for that data. But it turns out there's all these different privacy and security problems. There's the case where they give access to the government to peruse through your files, like Dropbox. We saw that with kind of the Prism leaks and the Prism information. And number two, there's just like security breaches. So they just fail to protect the files. So we saw the other day, a day or two ago, that Snapchat, a third-party application through Snapchat, got hacked, and so all these photos and media got exposed. So the idea is that if we remove the company control, we remove that central point and only give the users access to the file, so they only have the passwords to those files and not a company or nobody in between, then it's a lot more secure and private. The other thing is, since this is a network, a peer-to-peer network that's made up of users, we essentially, instead of having a central server farm or a central server, central company, we actually have the users contribute space to the network. And so they can earn money, they can earn cryptocurrency for doing that. So it's really about building a cloud built by and for the users where they control it rather than a company or a centralized entity. So we think that's a lot more efficient system, it's faster, it's cheaper, it's more private, more secure. So that's a general summary.
It sort of sounds similar to the promise of Bitcoin. So when you say that centralization essentially is the issue with cloud storage, it's a lot of the same problems that we experience in the financial sector, right? So a lot of that overlaps into the storage space, I guess.
Right. So yeah, you have Bitcoin whose value proposition is say, okay, here is a medium of exchange, a currency that is not controlled by any central bank, so they can't print it off or whatnot. For storage, you have a value proposition along the same lines where, okay, it's a storage network where you have control of your files, not a company. And so that there's a whole bunch of other things that come with that really make it stand and private and secure.
So why do you think that storage and cloud storage lends itself so much to decentralization? Is it that it makes available those resources for the first time? Do you think it's the efficiency, it's the trust? Can you go into this a bit?
Sure, it's all of those things, really. I mean, you could simply sell it on feature sets alone. So think about Amazon S3, a large cloud computing and storage interface for the entire internet. And they'll have a switch failure, and a quarter of the internet will go down because Amazon Web Services is down. So, people are losing money, they aren't so happy. Versus, if you look at Bitcoin, when has it gone down in the past 5 years? Do you know the numbers on that? Can you guess?
Probably none.
Probably none. So we've had some hard forks and some network difficulties, but it's a total of maybe 4 or 5 hours for the past 5 years, and so that's a pretty good uptime measurement. So in terms of decentralization, you start to eliminate failures in the system. Then you get into portions. Again, it's aspects like privacy. Since there's no central server, there's no central thing to essentially hack or expose or get into. So you could have a relay node in that gets destroyed or hacked or whatnot. It doesn't matter because you can't read any of the intermediary information. So let's say a miner goes down or it gets broken into, it has no effect on the Bitcoin network. Same thing for the storage network. If a particular node gets shut down or hacked or falls off some server rack, has no effect on the network because it's just routing that information through, it's providing an additional portion to the network. But you really have to destroy large amounts of the network to have really any effect.
So let's kind of take this, what you've been talking about, and go a bit into the architecture of storage. So as far as I understand, right, on the files essentially get cut into pieces and then stored by a whole large number of nodes in the network, and then there's the redundancy aspect. Is that correct?
Correct. So let's kind of step through the lifetime of a file on this network. So you have, let's say, cat.jpg, and you want to upload it to the storage network. You want to store this awesome cat picture that you took. So you take this file, it would go into the client software sitting on your computer. It would encrypt that file with keys that only you control. it would split that file into multiple pieces using erasure encoding, and then it would distribute those broken up encrypted pieces to multiple people on the network. So the idea is that you have, let's say, for example, 3 people who are hosting the redundant chunks of these files. And so if one goes down, no big deal. The network's going to check that and say, okay, that person who was supposed to be hosting that chunk is not there anymore, so we can recover that from the existing chunks. And so from that portion, we have all these files, or bits of chunks, floating around the network. It's encrypted on your computer, so it doesn't matter who's listening in on the data connection or who has a chunk in that file. It's encrypted. They have no idea how the pieces go together. On the other side of that, you want to retrieve that cat picture and essentially maybe share it with someone else. So you take the hash of the file, so this is the identifier for the file. So it's just broken up in bits and pieces spread across the network. So we have these identifiers for the file so we can find these pieces. And then we have the keys so we can decrypt them and put them back together. And so I have to keep these myself, or if I want to share with a friend, I share him the identifiers and the decryption keys. And then either of us can go to the network, retrieve these files, and download and decrypt them. And so there's no kind of problems in terms of middlemen or people stealing or hacking the files because, again, they don't have access to the decryption keys for the file unless you share it with them. And they don't necessarily know how these pieces fit together. So that's kind of a general overview of the lifetime of a file as it goes through this network. Now, one of the cool portions of this is a peer-to-peer network. So one thing people kind of question about is speed. So essentially, it's the speed of a peer-to-peer network. If you've ever used torrents or BitTorrent, you know that this is quite fast. So you have a file that you distribute out, and you have it spread around all these people. Well, you can download all those chunks back simultaneously. So under scale, essentially, you can retrieve that file back. The bottleneck is literally your connection. The network is going to expand and scale to.
What about the connection speed of the people hosting your file? You'll depend on those as well, no?
Well, no, it'll add up like a torrent network. So essentially, I can be downloading this piece from this guy, and this piece from this guy, and this piece from this guy, all simultaneously. So you kind of add those connection speeds up.
So I had a question about that. This is something that I thought about a lot because typically when you ask, because you're downloading from so many different parts at once, right? So is this sort of speed expected on storage?
So there's 2 things that are rewarded in storage. One is actually physically storing the files, and you're cryptographically proving to the other person or to the network that you're storing those files, and you get paid for that. 2 is the bandwidth portion. So you're essentially getting paid for transferring that file to someone else. So in terms of that, there's this competition to say, hey, I want this file. These guys are storing it. These guys are wanting to get that file to me as fast as possible because those are the ones that are going to get the payment. Those are the ones that are going to get the reward. So it's up for the people who are, we call farmers on the network, who are providing this resource to essentially compete and get that file to you as fast as possible.
Okay, so there's in fact some sort of a competition going on between different farmers, or I guess storage providers, maybe another way to call them, to provide you those files as fast as possible, and those who can provide them first get paid?
Correct.
Okay.
Is there a blockchain somewhere in there?
Yes. So we make heavy use of the Bitcoin blockchain, and we're also experimenting with some other blockchains. So essentially what we're using now in terms of the Bitcoin blockchain is we have Storjcoin, which is a counterparty asset, and of course Counterparty is running on the Bitcoin blockchain. Yeah. So that is the cryptocurrency that we use for buying and selling space inside the storage network. And then we have other use cases in terms of using the blockchain to keep track of files, where files are, to transfer encryption keys and various different methodologies that we use the blockchain.
Okay, so you use the blockchain for different aspects, such as sending money to pay for the service provided, but also to send information or to store the information of
right.
like
So
where
the files
the
themselves
files.
are not. The files themselves are not stored on the blockchain.
Yeah, I know, but
we
the
use the blockchain.
location or.
Correct. So we use the blockchain as a mediation method, and also know where the files are, what's the state of them in the network. But we don't just use the Bitcoin blockchain. We're exploring other blockchains as well that we can use, because we can use multiple blockchains at once.
So for that, those other things such as like the mediation message like communications between different nodes. I presume are you also using Counterparty for that, or is it its own separate storage blockchain? Can you go maybe a little bit more into that?
Sure. So there's many different types and many different applications, many different use cases. So essentially, we can use the Bitcoin blockchain as that cryptocurrency method, and use that other platforms to essentially keep track of the files. So essentially, the way we're building out Storj is kind of one step at a time. And so we're looking at some of the existing technology that we have out there in terms of building out mediation methods and whatnot. And so we can have oracles or whatnot enforce those mechanisms. And those work to a degree. But we're also looking to some future platforms that are being developed, like Ethereum and whatnot, to build out contracts to essentially make the data network smarter, to be able to have not only essentially service level agreements. So you say, I'm going to have this file, and I'm going to provide this level of uptime for this particular file and this speed. And so you do that, but you might need someone watching the network or some kind of oracle to enforce that. But then we can start making that easier and start using things like Ethereum and some of these other smart contract platforms to make them more enforceable. So we can work on every level, but essentially there's some portions that we can use some of these future platforms to make it easier for us, and essentially add to the feature set and add to the cool stuff we can do. So it really depends on a particular use case. If you give me a specific one, I can dive more into it, or we can just leave it at the kind of the general stage.
So Sebastian, you said you tried it out today?
Yeah, actually, well, I just sent a file to Shawn actually before we started this. So.
Yeah, so we have two applications that we're
upload a
working
file
on.
quite simply just by drag and dropping it on the web interface for the beta of Metadisk.
Correct. So we have two
I think it's pretty
applications that we're working on. Metadisk, which is kind of your drag and drop web version of Dropbox, and then DriveShare, which allows users to sell their hard drive space to the network. So Metadisk has kind of been floating around there in a kind of alpha beta stage, and we're continuing to work very hard on DriveShare and getting that integrated in. So we have some stuff floating around that people can play with.
Now, this version of Metadisk that's online right now, is that something that people can use today? I mean, can we communicate this URL or not?
Yeah. So the URL for Metadisk is node1.metadisk.org. I wouldn't recommend it for storing all your super important files on there. It's a very, very rough development beta that we're constantly playing around with. So
of course.
You can use it if you want to share a file with your friend or whatnot.
Like cat pictures.
Don't look at us if it gets deleted through some kind of development update or bug or whatnot. So you can try it out. Just don't rely on it.
I want to kind of go into these apps. So essentially, this Metadisk app is going to be the first real version of your decentralized Dropbox platform. It's very nice. I mean, it's a web version, so you can essentially drop a file in there, and then you've got the link, and you can copy that link to somebody else. how do you see things evolving? Do you see, because I mean that's not really how people use Dropbox today. People use Dropbox and Google Drive as a syncing service for them to kind of back up their files on the cloud and have sort of the same file structure that they would have on their hard drive. Is this something that you see happening in the future with for Storj?
Yeah, so essentially we built on an API and then we built that application on top of it. So that's just kind of a sample application, so we can drag and drop files and kind of use the network and get things started. But we really see other kind of applications in terms of decentralized video, decentralized audio, decentralized images, web services running on the Storj platform, and then people building out, or us building out apps that more function like Dropbox, that use the existing APIs that we use to build that application, but instead making a more syncing application that you're used to. So we're working on building some of those things out, and we already have the platform and the API to do that. We just need to sit down a little bit more and actually physically code that syncing portion on top.
So even something like decentralized web hosting, is that something that could be done?
Yeah, so that's actually one of our major pushes. So in terms of that, the thing that we're trying to focus on first is media. So images, video, audio. So you can particularly have, you can store your content on Storj. You can have the Storj network serve that content. And so we're also looking at ways to also embed web pages in there. So
how do you think is that performance-wise, how is that going to compare to web hosting services people use today, whether it's like, running their own server or to something like?
So we see it best using our current methods and APIs as almost a CDN or a content distribution network. So you can essentially run just the static pages in the database off your own web host, website, server, be it a small or one or whatnot, and then we take care of like all the backend assets that take up a majority of the processing power and space and whatnot. So in terms of that, we really see it starting to replace some of the content services because of the feature sets it involves. So let's say YouTube, for example. There's inherent takedown notices and whatnot. You'll upload a particular video, and some copyright institution, whether or not that's a valid takedown or not, they'll remove it. So you have censorship within YouTube, and a lot of people don't like that. So we build out, and we have demos of this on our website. If you look at our forum, we did a little app contest, and people built these apps out. So you can have a decentralized video player that's running on your website that doesn't go to YouTube but goes to the Storj network, so that particular file that's uploaded can never be taken down or destroyed or whatnot. The other portion is the fact that it's running on a peer-to-peer network, so that file can be distributed to a server or caching server that's geographically close to the users, and we can distribute it all over the place, and this kind of auto scales and auto balances itself. So you can start getting really good performance out of just average users that really don't care about the privacy or centralization or censorship aspect of it. They're just like, okay, my download is going a little bit faster because that person who's serving it is down the street rather than in some data center a long ways away. So we see both application developers kind of using it for their platforms initially for the content distribution, and then starting to get into actually serving full web pages and full content through the network. There's a lot of use cases.
To disrupt a whole lot of different types of industries, right? I mean, you can disrupt YouTube, you can disrupt Spotify, you can disrupt the whole CDN industry, essentially.
Right. Kind of thing. So you have to start thinking of Storj not as a singular application, not just a decentralized Dropbox, but a platform that allows things like that to be built.
No, I definitely see it as more as just of a decentralized Dropbox. But how do you foresee that this will happen? I mean, how do you plan on enabling people to develop these apps on top of your platform? I think that's a core component of being able to develop this, is providing that platform for people to come on, easily learn the API, and develop apps on top of that. Do you think there's sort of like an app store or something where people develop apps on top of storage? What do you see there?
Sure, sure. So essentially, that's what we're building out through Metadisk. So Metadisk is kind of our full node, full access to the network application and code base. So one of the things that I saw with Bitcoin is that it was very hard to get into development and very hard to get it running and syncing and all this kind of stuff. So when I was starting to design Storj, I said, hey, instead of having this be some specialized client, let's build it into an application that can run on the web. And so any old programmer that has at least some semblance of an idea how to work an API can connect to any one of these nodes or run it himself and start to develop applications for it. So we don't particularly see an app store for this, but we particularly see people essentially taking the storage software and white labeling it. So they'll take the storage software as a back end to store all their data for a game or some kind of application, and then they'll essentially have a product built on top of that. So we don't necessarily care about people sticking the storage name on it, just that they're using it as a back end, they're using the network.
Okay. There's a question actually in the chat room. Somebody was asking if you could build a relational database like a MySQL database on top of Storj.
So that's kind of like on our wish list. There's essentially what happens is with current blockchain technology, it's very hard to do that in a scalable manner. So I can have some content like a picture or a video on there, and I can insert that and I can get that around the network. That's a more immutable source of data. That's a static source of data. Once you start getting into relational databases, you essentially have to make things highly mutable and highly scalable and make them very fast. You don't want to make a database query and then it takes like 5 minutes to execute. So in terms of that, there's other blockchain technologies that we're looking at. And we're working with, I think, MyTables on this and some other people to kind of figure out this concept of how we can take this blockchain technology and make it fast and make be able to have wrappers and APIs to be able to make these database systems that are decentralized, have no central points of failure, have no central company, and run off of something like a blockchain. But the technical portions of how we do that specifically are still kind of being thought of, still kind of being worked on. The current blockchain technology is not quite there to get a very fast and very scalable database.
So if other people will kind of white label storage to run their own applications on that, does that mean they will use the same blockchain, the same currency, for example?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. So I guess in that sense it is sort of like you saying what you mentioned before, that essentially Storj provides an API and then people write their applications on that. Correct. That may have whatever kinds of looks on the front end, but on the back end it's this one network of peers, I guess in a little bit like Counterparty built on top of Bitcoin, but it's the same nodes, the same mining.
Right. And that introduces some cool features. So you can have someone who makes pinkbox.com and someone makes redbox.com. And essentially someone can store files on Pinkbox, which is this completely other application, and then retrieve it on Redbox.
Oh, that's really interesting.
It adds some cool interoperability between the applications because they share the same underlying data platform.
Oh, that is cool.
So that's something you can never do with something like Dropbox and Google Drive. You can't store a file on Dropbox and then go ahead and retrieve it on Google Drive.
Oh, that is brilliant. So if you'd be like using Dropbox, you say like, oh, I'm tired, I want to switch to Google Drive,
Right.
but all your files are already there, right? You just switch
Exactly.
over.
So then we start to get into cool market aspects and competition where people are using same underlying network, but now they have to compete for features and all this stuff adding on top of it.
Yeah.
And if they don't keep the users happy, they don't keep those feature sets up.
It's easy to
2
switch.
seconds later, I'm just going to go to the next website and all my files are going to be there. So it really encourages people to build out cool applications to grab the storage user's base attention.
What else do you think will happen because of that interoperability that perhaps today we can't even like really seems unexpected or something that wouldn't be possible today?
I don't know. It's kind of all up for grabs. We're just kind of building out this tool set. We're building the hammer and giving you some nails and saying, good luck, figure it out, build some cool stuff, and. I'm pretty sure a couple of years ago we couldn't even thought. I mean, just look at Bitcoin in 2009. Could we have even predicted all the cool applications and use cases that we built so far and are trying to build when Bitcoin just came out? So I think it's the same way with storage. We can't really speculate on all the cool stuff that we could build, but we definitely know there's some cool ideas out there.
So these are sort of the user-facing apps, right? But I'd like to come back to DriveShare and this proposition of being able to sell your hard drive space essentially on the storage network. This opens up, I guess, even some new business models because now, as a guy who's got a computer and some storage laying around, I can sell my storage online, but I can also as you've talked about in some of your blog posts, get a VPS and a virtual private server and rent out some space on there. So can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So there's like really two people we're trying to sell this on, at least initially. So A, the people who already do mining, right? They understand this cool cryptocurrency mumbo jumbo stuff, and they know how to run the applications and make it work. So in terms of that, we kind of want those people to start running this kind of DriveShare software, which is a really cool value proposition. You say, instead of doing all this hard computational work and this crunching hashes, let's take this resource that we have and let's sell it to somebody else on the other side of the network and earn coins that way. The other portion is, the average user who's going to like, oh, I can earn money selling my hard drive space, downloads an application, hits go, and he's earning cryptocurrency. So the cool thing is it lowers the barrier to entry to the cryptocurrency market. So for Bitcoin, you're not going to earn but a penny trying to mine on a regular computer nowadays. But for an average user, they could earn a couple of bucks of cryptocurrency and kind of get their feet wet in terms of storage and farming.
So there's
kind of two aspects to it, and two user groups that we're trying to initially appeal to.
Can you talk a bit more about the profitability? Do you think it will actually be, do you have any ideas? So let's say I have 50 gigabytes on my hard disk, let's say I make that available. What would I expect? Like, that be a few dollars a month or more than that?
Sure. So if you look on our website, driveshare.org, that's driveshare.org, we have a calculator that you can put in a number of gigabytes and select a rate or a cloud provider equivalent and hit go, and it'll give you like the estimated cost per month or the estimated earnings per month. When you start to doing research into cloud storage, you start to find how much these guys overcharge for their services. It's actually anywhere from 10 to 100x. So if you look at a provider like EMC, they charge, last time I looked, about $3,000 for a terabyte. So you can go to Best Buy and grab a 2 terabyte drive for $60. So when you start to actually crunch these numbers, there's these huge margins that these guys are operating at. And one, it's for a profit motive, and two, they have a lot of costs associated with it, right? They have servers, they have employees, they have maintenance, they have heating, they have cooling, they have electricity, the insurance, investor profits, building space, all these things factor into those costs. For the storage network, we eliminate all those. You just download an application, hit go, and that's it. So we've eliminated all these costs and these profit motives that these large corporations charge because they've really cornered the market. So at least for the people that participate initially, I think they'll be quite happy with the amount they earn. So everything's based on a market in our ecosystem. So you're renting out your hard drive space, you're setting a price that you'll sell that hard drive space for, and someone on the other side of that will set the price that they want to buy storage space for, and so you meet on a market. So we want to make it less of a singular application or a singular use case. It's a market for data, and so those tug back and forth to get good price discovery and good pricing based on demand.
So do you think it will mostly be people seeing an opportunity there and then renting space on, for example, Amazon or other cloud storage providers, and then making that available on
So
storage, or will it be people having space on their own computers at home?
I think it'll be both. So it all depends on kind of the demand of the network and the need of the network for data. So in terms of that, demand for data might outpace the amount that people can share on their hard drives or physically plug in. So then you'll look to external services to kind of augment that as that begins to grow. So it'll be a mixture of things, all trying to cater to this market demand of people who want storage and are buying it from the network.
Now you make some projections as to the types of profits that you could earn by selling VPS storage. So essentially, you have a cost of about $635 per month. You could make a gross profit of $8,000 per month. Am I reading this right?
So if you look at, it's decided on the market prices, it's decided on the demand. We have, like I said, a calculator on there that what we do is just compare it against different cloud storage providers. So we say, this amount of gigabytes you have, this is the rate of Dropbox or Google Drive or all these other services, so you can kind of estimate, okay, how much would they earn, how much would I earn, how much would I price it on this market. So I can't predict a market. If I could predict a market, I'd be buying and selling Bitcoins, making millions of dollars, and I'd be off on my yacht. So we're just providing a flexible platform, and the market will decide what the market decides.
Of course, if it's true, right, Sebastian, like the numbers you were reading out, then what we'd expect is that lots of people come in, start offering storage space, and the price would be driven down to, I guess, the marginal cost of people, providing that.
Yeah, so that's essentially what we would hope. But the thing is we have to think of is the cloud storage and computing industry is a $150 billion industry. So essentially, we have to saturate that 150 a year dollar industry before we start driving down the cost. And so, at that point, it's a lot bigger than Bitcoin and a lot of other portions in this cryptocurrency space. So the cool thing is, unlike mining, for farming, there's existing demand. There's who doesn't use Dropbox or Google Drives or any of these cloud storage companies to store their data, and even large corporations are using massive portions of data. So there's huge billions and billions of dollars of demand that we have to cater to first before we'll even start to drive down the prices. So, but we can still make those nice 10x, 100x margins that all these other cloud providers make, at least in the early stages.
What would be interesting would be, much like a lot of the financial industry is starting to now wake up to Bitcoin, and perhaps even taking advantage of some of those technologies themselves, would be for large cloud storage and providers like Dropbox and Google and Amazon to also start doing this kind of thing and also start operating storage nodes.
Yeah, I agree that it would be a nice welcome change for them to start to pay attention to privacy and encryption and all these other portions that we bring along with it.
Doesn't seem very likely to happen.
Huh? Yeah, but it's very unlikely that a several billion-dollar company is going to completely change their business model. But hey, they might, and I think it would be great for all of us.
Now let's get into the crowd sale. So there was a crowd sale that started, I guess, a few weeks ago. It's now ended.
Yeah. So we had a crowd sale around August-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And that now ended. We raised 950 bitcoins as a portion of that. So nice, decent chunk of change. So essentially, the value proposition from that is that you participate in the crowd sale, and from that you get early access to Metadisk, DriveShare, and then you get some storage coins. So when the network starts up, you can buy and sell some space in the network. So those were kind of the three value propositions of the crowd sale. And so that's...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So people that way bought some storage coin. Can you tell us a bit about, how many storage coins were given to people that way? How many exist overall right now, and how is that going to develop in the future?
Sure. So in that portion, a lot of people are signed up based on their contributions for early access. And then the other portion is we have about 41 million tokens that were bought purchased via the crowd sale. And that is, it's worth noting that is our first crowd sale. So I think we're one of the only people who are intending to essentially do a multi-round crowd sale. So we kind of want people to see and actually play with and actually use the software before they really start saying, hey, this is something that I actually want to purchase tokens in or early access to. So we don't want to get into the whole butterfly labs, 2 weeks, kind of never deliver Mt. Gox kind of thing. So we can kind of start out slow. People can see our progress. People can see things coming out, and so we can give them another portion to be able to participate in the crowd sale once they say, okay, this is viable. This is not just some crazy far-fetched kind of thing. So that's why we're kind of doing a multi-round process, and that allows us to kind of mix rewards based on what we're working on.
Yeah, I'm just curious because, right, in a sense, it's like you could think of Storj as a startup, right? I mean, it's not too different, although in some ways it is very different, right? Because it's a decentralized thing, and it's interesting to just see how these economics work. And I think Ethereum is one where like a lot of people looked into it. A lot of people, it was because it's so well publicized, such a big project. So I'm curious to sort of understand here as well. So. Let me let's go into that slightly more detail. You mentioned that 41 million tokens were sold in that first round. Does that correspond to, let's say, 10% of all the Storjcoin or Storjcoin?
Right. So there's going to be essentially.
Is there some valuation you can attach to that?
Sure. So essentially, we've hard capped the number of Storjcoin that there's ever going to be at 500 million Storjcoin. So you can do the percentage calculation on the percentage of tokens. 15% of those tokens go to the developers to spend on apps and development and documentation. And the other portion to that no one's done is essentially 15% of that also goes to the community. So those funds are controlled by community members that were voted in to essentially spend those funds for marketing or promotion or building apps. So I always thought it important that the people in the community, be it the developers, communities, have some kind of token or usage to be able to promote adoption, promote development via bounties and all those kind of portions. But the problem is that I saw working on other projects is that only the developers would have these tokens, right? Only the developers would have some X percentage or whatnot. And so the community leaders or the people in the community would have all these cool ideas on stuff they wanted to do, but they would have to ask the developers permission to be able to do that. And so I was like, no. Let's give the developers some resources, but balance that by the exact same percentage for the community to have the exact same amount of resources. The community has the exact same amount of financial power. So you don't centralize all the tokens that you use for these projects in one group. No, you have two groups with equal financial power in the storage ecosystem, and that's worked out very well for us.
So you would be, part of the developers, right? Then 15% community, and then I guess about 10% of the total went to the people who invested in the crowd sale. So how does that work with the other 60%? Are those sort of held in reserve for future crowd sales, as you mentioned?
So I wouldn't say invested. People bought early access to
yes.
software in the crowd sale. So we're not getting in terms of, we're not issuing unlicensed security and all these guys who
I actually did want to ask about that. I have asked a whole bunch of people who are all doing sort of similar things, like always, like how do you do that? What's the legal side?
Right. So we really don't want to get into that aspect of this being blatantly issuing, illegal securities or whatnot. We develop software, and so
you
the main value proposition of crowd sale is you get early access to the software, so you can start mining and use these cool applications that have all these different features. So that's what people are purchasing, and the tokens are kind of just the extra that's used as the fuel in the system to make it run. So you bought a car, and we gave you some gas with it. You have to go to the gas station and go buy more gas, but you can load up on gas now if you would like. So essentially, that's kind of the portion to it. So the other tokens are just kind of held in reserve to be used for two main portions. One is future crowd sales that we hold, and the other portion, so that can be for the Metadisk and drive share applications or other applications that we want resources for other developers outside of us or inside of us to work on. The other portion is essentially early farming. So the people participating in the crowd sale, we have this pool of funds that we can say, okay, here's the resources that we want to host on the network. We want to, let's say, for example, download all of YouTube and store it on the Storj network. So we have some tokens to be able to kind of kickstart that and get that working.
So that also means that there's not going to be like a mining and then a continual money increase, because all the money that miners earn comes from people who pay for storage, right? It's sort of a closed circle.
Right. So that's one of the things that I highly disagree with in terms of building out resource-based networks. You have other portions and projects that essentially they have mining in them and they're just devaluing the entire network. So we don't want to do that at all. We don't want to devalue the token used in the network by this generation when we can use other methods to secure the blockchain and whatnot. So I'm a pretty strong proponent of not using mining when you don't really need it. And for proof of resource, actually, when you start adding in mining portions, it starts some really bad behaviors in terms of attacks that you really don't want in your network, and it adds more problems than it solves. So we've thought of some really alternate distribution methods, and then we use, of course, the Bitcoin blockchain via Counterparty to actually secure the stuff. But we don't have to worry about this generation of tokens that's just devaluing everyone.
So we've got a couple more things we want to talk about, but before we do that, we'd like to talk about our sponsor, Fairlay. Fairlay is a Bitcoin prediction market where you can place predictions on the likelihood of sporting events, the Bitcoin price, and current affairs. among other things. And if you bet correctly, you earn money. So Brian, can you tell us what's the prediction market?
Yeah, absolutely. So a prediction market is a site or is a market where basically parties are matched up and they can make predictions about things. So we actually have a prediction today that is super relevant to the topic we're talking about. And let me just pull that up. So the prediction is whether in April 2015 the market cap of Storjcoin X, or what exactly is the name?
Yep, Storjcoin X, that's correct.
Storjcoin X or MateSafe coin is going to be bigger. Now, I'm actually going to ask you about MateSafe afterwards because I'm curious how those projects compare. Essentially, that gives you sort of an opportunity if you believe more in one project or in the other project to take a position on that and see how it goes. Of course, it would also be for you, Shawn, perhaps if you want to hedge your risk, perhaps it could be something to bet on MateSafe. I don't know to what extent those are competing, but in the end, they do both provide some kind of a cloud storage solution. So if you want to check that out, you can take a position there and see how things work out, and perhaps it also makes it a bit more exciting to watch how this space develops. What's your prediction there, Shawn? At the moment, I know MateSafe is a much bigger platform. Well, at least the market cap is much higher. But
sure. So in terms of that, I don't know. I'm kind of biased, so I'd probably have to say Storjcoin. But in terms of that, a market cap is probably not the best representation. Actually, our total amount of coins is misrepresented on CoinMarketCap. So as we kind of build out, those will probably be fixed. So our essentially, I'll actually see if I can do the calculations here. But if you actually add the total amount of coins that we're actually going to have and actually be created, I think people are going to be like, wait a minute, why did they jump up, 100x or 1000x?
Oh yeah. I see it
the
because
crowd sale, we started
40 million
farming
right now,
all those coins, and so they've entered the market, and so we have a kind of jump in market cap. So those numbers aren't completely accurate that are on CoinMarketCap right now.
So anyways, if you want to take a position on that, you can do so at fairlay.com/epicenter, and you'll find that prediction in the Bitcoin section. And so I want to thank fairlay.com for the support of Epicenter Bitcoin.
Absolutely. So let's actually use that as a great segue into something we just touched on now. Can you talk a little bit about how storage compares to MateSafe, and also there's another project called BitCloud that sounds really similar to me. I'm not an expert in these three projects, but can you run us through what the differences are? Also, so of course, people who want to take a position have some more inside knowledge.
Sure. So in terms of decentralized cloud storage platforms, you should be looking at Storj, MateSafe, Siacoin, Permacoin, and Filecoin. So those are the 5 main portions that kind of look pretty promising in the space. So I guess that your first question was in terms of MateSafe. So we actually have a pretty good relationship with just about all these projects, including MateSafe. Actually, we've been talking to them from the very beginning of their kind of foray into the crypto space. So earlier in the year, when we were kind of doing our due diligence on Storj with the BitAngels, is when they kind of stumbled upon MateSafe and kind of doing something similar. So out of that discussion, they kind of sold that crypto would be a good solution for them, and so they jumped in the Bitcoin space and had a very successful crowd sale. And here we are. So we've been talking to them from the very beginning. So love what they're doing and what they're building. So the difference between MadeSafe and Storj is essentially they're working on the decentralized internet, and we're more focused in terms of building out just decentralized storage. So they're both a little bit more broad. They have a lot more stuff that they have to code up. Ours is just getting into the storage ecosystem and area. But really, we're looking at all these platforms, including Sidecoin and Permacoin and Filecoin and MadeSafe, and saying, at the end of the day, we mainly develop applications here at Storj, or at least sample applications that can be expanded. So if any of these particular platforms take off and is actually viable, we'd be happy to implement it in our applications. There's, we can build out APIs.
How would you do that?
So that depends on the technical implementation of each one. But the idea is that these are decentralized open source file storage networks, so we can build APIs to make them interoperable. So we can have our Metadisk app, and you store a file on this Metadisk app, and essentially can plug into the Storj and the MadeSafe network. So you can take your file and you can store it on the Storj network, the MadeSafe network. You can split it in half and do both. So you can simply just increase the choices that the user has. And again, it's all open source. It's all distributed. It's all decentralized. So I don't see any kind of reason why these platforms can't work together. And we've said publicly that we're going to take a non-competitive approach with all these other platforms, because it's way better to just work together and build some really cool apps that mesh the platforms and really cool features that just mesh the platforms than trying to, fight or compete or the like. Because we're just getting starting out, and we have $150 billion to saturate. So there's lots of stuff to do, and there's yachts enough for everybody.
Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, I guess, maybe a question that's on a lot of people's minds is, how do you make money with this? Like, how do you pay yourself by developing Storj and moving forward? How would your company make money?
Sure. So we kind of have two portions to this. One's the open source community side, and that's funded by crowd sales and built up by the users and developers and volunteers and whatnot. The other side that we have to that is Storj Labs, which is essentially a corporate entity that's going to be entering venture funding pretty soon. And so essentially that's taking the storage protocols and tool sets and wrapping up in a nice pretty bow and pushing it into enterprise customers and whatnot. So think of it almost like starting BitPay or Coinbase in 2009 at the exact same time that you launch and you're building Bitcoin. And so you have immediate use cases into enterprise and things that you can start thinking about from the very beginning. And so you'll have a company that wants to use all the feature sets of Storj in terms of privacy, security, cost savings, but they don't understand or want to deal with all this Bitcoin, blockchain, crypto mumbo jumbo. So as Storj Labs as an entity can provide nice tool sets and abstract all that stuff out for them, and so they can use it just like they've been using Amazon S3 or all these other services. So we just make it easy for them to use as a tool, and they don't have to carry about the technical back end at all.
So that's a bit of the sort of Red Hat Linux type relationship that people often mention as a business model in an open source space.
Right. So it essentially is on the lines of that model.
Okay, interesting. Well, thanks so much. Is there something else you want to talk about? I guess if people want to learn more about Storj, they can. Where can they reach you or get involved in the project?
The primary website that you want to go to is storj.io, storj.io, storj.io. And so that's where you can sign up for our mailing list to kind of get the status on the project, when things are going to be released, and kind of what we're doing in the space. And then you can look from there in terms of the applications that we're building and the demos that we have out. So that's a great place to get information. If you'd like to get involved, we're looking for more developers to build applications on top of Storj that do cool things and play with our existing APIs. So you can get in contact with us at hello@storj, storj.io, if you want to get involved that way. And we have also a forum and some other mediums to get in contact with us in the community. Towards probably the end of this year, beginning of next year, we'll probably do another crowd sale. So again, the main value proposition of the crowd sale is early access to the software for Storj. So we'll be pushing out very, very early versions of DriveShare and Metadisk fairly soon, but again, only the people who participate in the crowd sale will get access to that. So we'll open up that opportunity again once we get feedback from our initial participants.
Just very briefly, if you participate in the crowd sale, though, you also obtain, Storjcoin, right? Which then
exactly.
You could potentially, although I guess you're not intended to, since it's not a securities offering, but you could use that to speculate on the the future and the success of the platform. Correct?
Right. So I mean, we're more using the cryptocurrency for buying and selling space in the network and using it for early access.
Right.
It's a necessary point, but it's a cryptocurrency. People are going to do what they're going to do with it. So,
yes.
We have no hand in that. So.
I bought it this morning.
So the market will do what the market
some people
will
do it. If some people do it, don't blame it on Shawn.
Don't blame it on me. I didn't know. I didn't do it. I was developing a software, So.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks so much for coming on. I think it was super interesting to go into that and just see the sort of really the first time we had a decentralized application on and not just talked about it sort of as a theoretical thing and as we work on that broad area, but something really specific. And I'm actually really excited. I think it sounds like a great project.
I gotta say that to me, this is probably one of the most exciting areas of development in crypto and in decentralized apps because it seems so obvious, right? And also it's something that everybody uses. I mean, to me, it's what I'm most looking forward to in terms of what I could actually use crypto for.
I agree. It's just we have this tool set, we have this problem, they fit together quite well, and like you said, it's just kind of the obvious next step. So that's
I think the next I guess sector that needs to be disrupted, like you're doing, would be access to Wi-Fi.
So MeshNet is next.
Yeah.
So we have to solve decentralized cloud storage and maybe decentralized compute, but that MeshNet is kind of that next third step. So
when you're starting the meshnet.io,
it's probably already taken. So, but we'll see where that goes. There's plenty of exciting things in the space. So, always good stuff to look out for.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for coming on again. Thanks for letting us talk about this topic, and I think Sebastian will be excited to try that. I'm going to be excited to try that, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to be excited to try that.
Yeah, maybe we can do another talk once we get a little further and start pushing some things.
Absolutely, we'd love at some point down the line. And thanks so much for listeners for listening. We've had like 13 viewers on here the whole time, which is pretty cool because we just started doing Hangouts. So I think most people are like, almost everyone still they listen to it as an audio podcast. But it's great to have actually some people kind of live in. It's exciting.
And we had questions too.
You had a question. That's super exciting. So hopefully we see more of that in the future. Also for those who are just listening on audio. We are doing live Hangouts now, so you can sort of watch it live, also ask questions, interact. You can, of course, also follow us on Twitter at EpicenterBTC. We'll also let you know when the Hangouts are happening, so you'll know about that. And you can, of course, support us with your tips, which we do appreciate, at epicenterbitcoin.com. epicenter.com/tips. You can also subscribe to a weekly newsletter at epicenterbitcoin.com/newsletter. And leave us an iTunes review. We'd love that, and you can let us know how we're doing, what we can do better. So, and what we're doing well, of course. Don't forget that. So, thanks so much, and we look forward to being back next week.
All right, awesome. Thanks for having me.